5 years had passed when I finally encountered my ex-husband, whom I once thought was my soulmate. He had caught me in an affair with my boss. The years that followed were long and painful, as everything in my life seemed to crumble. My husband, Ethan, found me in Michael's arms. The betrayal was so profound that it shattered not only him, but also the life we had built together over the last decade. I can still picture Ethan standing there, speechless and stunned, his hands trembling as he held the takeout bag he had brought for me. His eyes lost their shine when he saw Michael and me in such a compromising position. He didn't yell, didn't get angry. He just stared at me, as if I were a stranger, before turning and walking away. The divorce came shortly after. Ethan refused to talk to me, and I couldn't blame him. I signed the papers, crying, knowing I had no right to fight for anything, our home, our memories, or him. When it was all over, I left town, unable to bear the weight of my mistakes or the judgment from our mutual friends. For the next few years, I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy became my refuge, where I could reflect on the cracks in my marriage and face the deeper issues within myself that led to my betrayal. It wasn't just the affair I had to come to terms with. It was the loneliness, the fear of not being enough, and the desperate need for validation that I sought from Michael. I had destroyed the most meaningful part of my life, and no amount of introspection could undo the harm. The guilt ate at me daily. But what hurt the most wasn't the affair itself. It was realizing how deeply Ethan had loved me in a way I had never fully understood. He had been patient, kind, and supportive. He had been my anchor, the one person I could rely on for everything. Yet, I had betrayed him. I turned my back on all we had worked for and built together. Michael had been nothing more than a temporary escape, a brief distraction in a life that felt empty. But in the end, that fleeting relief cost me the love of my life. When I received the wedding invitation, I almost didn't open it. It was from Sarah, one of Ethan's closest friends, who had always been kind to me. Her name brought back memories of dinners, trips, and laughter that seemed like they had happened a lifetime ago. I hesitated to open the envelope, but when I saw the wedding location, my stomach sank. The ceremony would take place at the same church where Ethan and I had exchanged our vows. I almost tore up the invitation and threw it away, but something inside me, a need for closure, compelled me to go. I had never truly apologized to Ethan or had the chance to say goodbye. Now was my opportunity. The church looked almost identical to how it had on our wedding day, with the same stained glass windows, the soft glow of candles, and the faint scent of aged wood and roses. Every corner of that sacred place seemed to echo with memories of Ethan. I nervously scanned the crowd, torn between hoping and fearing that he might be there. And then I saw him. I had made the decision to attend the wedding, feeling like a ghost walking through the corridors of my past. Ethan, sitting near the front, looked effortlessly dashing in a dark suit. His hair had more gray now, but his posture remained confident. He was talking to a woman with bright red hair who laughed at something he said, her hand lightly brushing against his arm. A knot of regret and jealousy formed in my chest. Was she the one who had replaced me in his heart? Did she bring him the happiness I never could? I tried to blend into a pew without him noticing, but my movement caught his attention. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. The woman beside him was stunning, elegant and poised. Everything I felt I wasn't at that moment. His face was unreadable, a quiet recognition rather than anger or warmth. I lowered my head and focused on the ceremony, silently wrestling with the weight of my emotions. When the vows were exchanged and the reception began, I lingered near the exit, unsure whether to leave before the emotions became too overwhelming. But fate had other plans. I wanted to speak, to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't deserve his forgiveness after everything I had done. "Clara," I heard his voice softly call from behind me. I turned to face Ethan. He was only a few steps away, and he looked exactly like the man I had once loved. The pain in my chest was almost unbearable, and I felt my heart race. "Ethan," I managed to speak, my voice trembling with emotion. Up close, Ethan was even more impressive than I remembered. There was a calmness and maturity about him that I envied. He wasn't the same man I had left behind. Instead, he had grown into someone strong and quietly resilient. He had endured and moved on, while I had remained stuck in regret. His tone was polite but distant, as though we were strangers, not two people who had once shared years of love and trust. I wasn't sure it was a good idea to come, I confessed honestly. He nodded slightly, his gaze steady but unreadable. "So, you're well?" I asked, my voice hollow. The apology I couldn't fully express hung in the air. "Therapy helps," he replied coolly. "I'm trying to make sense of everything." "I'm relieved," I said, swallowing hard, trying to keep my composure. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I didn't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know how deeply sorry I am for ruining the best thing I've ever had. I was selfish, and I ruined us." Ethan looked at me for a long time, his face softening slightly. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, Clara," he said finally, "but I've made peace with what happened. I had to. It took time, a lot of time. I won't lie and say it didn't hurt like hell, but it's in the past now. I've moved on." His eyes drifted to the woman with the red hair, now talking animatedly near the dance floor. "I found peace," he added. A pang of jealousy hit me, but I pushed it aside. I had no right to feel that way anymore. "I never stopped loving you," I whispered, "but I know I wasn't the person you deserved." For a moment, Ethan's eyes softened, and I glimpsed the man I used to know. But that softness disappeared just as quickly as it had come, replaced by something distant. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara," he said in a calm, steady voice. "You deserve that, but it won't be with me." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes as I realized he was right. I had lost him, and no amount of regret could ever make it right.